Welcome. It's nice having you here for a conversation. So, I'm reaching that point in my career when I'm having to consider what comes next. I've turned 63 last year, and I've spent my entire working career looking at data. Um, Particularly, I remember having left university. I went to university late, by the way. So I got to work as an intern at ESCOM, Coburg Nuclear Power Station, during the apartheid years when some people were wanting to be, how should I put that? They'd like to have clipped the wings of those bright young sparks who would like to fly off and do interesting things. But then again, there are just some people who are just dicks, irrespective of how you look at them. And I ended up with one of those who was a purchasing manager. And look, I did not study IT. My background academically is in commerce, particularly industrial psych and economics. So I ended up in the buying office at Coburg Nuclear Power Station. And I was asked by the senior buyer or management or manager of the area to do a really ridiculous task. He had asked me over a 3-day period to go and pull in boxes of old purchase orders. In fact, 10 years of purchase orders. Now the nuclear power station's got 2 units that generates electricity, and these 2 units, they each would have different purchases throughout the year for maintenance and everything else, everything from O-rings to spanners and bolts and nuts. And he asked me to manually, because we're talking about 1987 year, 1987, 1988, and he asked me to get a couple of reams of A3 paper, an A3 size ruler with a metal tip, because I needed to tear some stuff off. He asked me to get a calculator with a tally roll on it. He was pedantic about exactly the width of the tally roll that I needed to have. Calculators, and then pedantically also showed me how to rule lines on a sheet of paper. Get one of the other interns to double check my work. And my job was, for the next 6 months, to sit in a corner and go through every one of the purchase order leverage files, starting chronologically 10 years prior to that. And I would have to write down, and I've got a lousy handwriting, I should have been a doctor. I had to write down the supplier, the product code, the price purchased, the date, just a range of stuff. Today, something which we know you'd quickly bounce into Excel form. But everything needed to be done manually. And so I needed to be able to do a 10-year analysis of procurement of parts for the maintenance of the nuclear power station. Interesting, but laborious, designed to murder the soul of anybody who attempted to get into that profession. But I did it. I started off. I took 2 days before I realized that this is what was going to kill me. That if anything else in this world was designed to end my life, it was that laborious, time-consuming, poring over reams of paper, drawing lines, writing neatly, adding things. It wasn't going to kill me. And what I did think to myself was that this is the reason why computers were invented. So I wandered over to a friend of mine who was working in stores and posed the problem to him, and he looked at it, grinned, and just used one word: Lotus. Lotus. Now, in my mind, I couldn't fathom how my problem could be solved by a really cool car, a water plant, or a yoga position. could not figure it out, and he introduced me to a product called Lotus 123. I ended up soaking up user manuals and found that getting into data was almost like I was predestined that I would look at data differently. I started knocking out spreadsheets, drawing up these lines, proving that I could print out 3 or 4 months of things that I captured. Took me a week to do that, and once again realized that no, this is not going to work. I spoke to the guy in stores again and said, yeah, but all of these things are eventually captured into the mainframe system. When they come in, after they've gone through delivery, all this work is eventually captured into the system. Why don't you just get them to extract the data for you? And there was a product called System W. You could dump it out as a flat file. I couldn't understand why it was called flat. But you dump this out and you could open it up inside of Lotus 123. And then you don't have to type all the stuff up. You could then start doing the analysis with the stuff that's typed up. Yes, it would be a lot of files because perhaps it would be one file for each unit for each month, but you could extract it. I said, And then I started loving this. Then I started noticing that everything I did was exceptionally predictable. You would hit the / button to open up a menu. You click the word file, you'd say open, you would find the latest download file. And we had a specific pattern that we could pick up always for those file names. You would open it, you would drop a couple of rows, delete them, you would go to the bottom, you would clean that up, you would then shorten things, you would remove columns you didn't need, and then you'd end up with a file that you could work with, and then you'd copy all of this, and then you'd go and paste it into another spreadsheet and close this file, and rinse and repeat for thousands of files. And once I realized, but this again is monotonous, it's an identical piece of work. I could write it out step by step, and I could get a 6-year-old kid to actually just do these steps. It was really that simple. And then I learned about macros. So you could write this system, you could tell the computer to do this step by step all the way through. And so it was going to end up being a 6-month job. Once I had written a series of macros, I sat and watched it, and it was absolute magic. It looked like magic because it was as if a ghost was behind the computer, pressing the / button, pulling open the menu, file open, the thing would open up, and you'd stand and be engrossed in this picture of movement that I had imbued life into a green screen computer. Somehow it was doing what I would do, and I could watch it mesmerized. And then I looked at this and I realized, but this is taking forever. It's doing far faster than I can. Obviously, it was doing at the speed of a computer, but it was still menu open, thing, grab, copy, paste, move, step through. And I started watching it. So I timed it, from when it opened a file to when it closed a file, to when it handled the next one. And I averaged out 10 files and realized at this rate, what would take me 6 months, this thing was going to do over a 6-week period. My manager was impressed. They were all very, very impressed that I could have done that amount of work already, because I was already typing this thing up. And as far as they're concerned, I had taken a piece of paper, and instead of drawing lines on it, I'd learned to use a typewriter as far as they were concerned. And I had typed up this stuff. So I had exceeded everybody's expectations. Having printed out an A3 of 1 month's transactions, and then explained that how I would not be taking 6 months, but actually it would take 6 weeks to complete. They were very impressed. They felt I'd learned the lessons. I needed to move on. I said, oh, just hold on for a second, because I seem to be onto something. I'm understanding something, and I don't want to let go of this. And I was told, no, it's time to move on. The other things, to learn about in the buying department. But because I could see what the computer was doing, I knew that there was no real need for me to open up the file and go through this rigmarole that that the Lotus was doing, because it knew the data. And what I really just needed to do was, where the data was, one file after the other, just copy them all into one file. There must have been an easier way to do that. So I spoke to one of the guys in IT, and he gave me 2 floppy disks. Not my floppy disk. How do you even explain that to somebody nowadays? They look like a CD, but they were floppy, very, very floppy. You could like fan yourself with it. You could fold it in half. They kept a fraction, not a single photograph that they could take on your phone would be able to fit on one of those floppies. But he gave me 2 floppies, and handwritten in Coke pen on it was DBase 3 Plus. Showed me how I put one into one drive and the other into the other, booted up, showed me how, and gave me a set of handwritten instructions, and gave me a user manual to play with. And again, I soaked up this user manual. And once I'd worked out the routine, the step-by-step steps that was needed to have imported data from flat files that were dumped out by System W into a single database, and to format it and to prepare it for printing, which is what I was doing, inclusive of a couple of the formulas that we were using to do some predictive analysis. Once I'd encoded that, and look, it took me about a week or 2 to get that right. But once I'd done it, and I had a couple of trial runs, I could then take that entire directory of all of the flat files, and I would start my program off. And it came on the day that everybody reached a point of frustration, wanting to discipline me if I did not leave the computer alone and start doing other work within the buying department. And I pleaded, just give me, just today, and lunchtime, can I show you what I've got at lunchtime? And because I couldn't make sense of the code that was written, it did not make sense to them until I pressed go. And what would have taken 6 weeks took 60 seconds. 60 seconds later, that printer started chunking out page after page after page of formatted, correctly formatted report that the buying manager looked for. In total, I had taken 6 weeks. Yes, the first week was all gathering data. The second week, I had learned how to use Lotus 1 to 3 to be able to get the columns into the right spaces. And I took another week and a half somewhere along the way to learn DBase 3, to write a program, and eventually to knock it out. Please note, I do not think of myself as being in IT. I have never. I know that I've done a lot in our industry from an IT point of view. Many people in IT reference me as their mentor. And yes, for our country, I've written the curricula for DataScience and others. But at no point in time have I ever imagined that I'm in IT. And as I come to the end of my career right now, once again, I don't think that I've spent much time in IT. What I have done is understand how to be able to make better quality decisions on the data that flows through the organization. And I've understood data over the last 40 years differently to many people. And in fact, it's been more of a journey of understanding human intelligence and understanding that artificial intelligence and understanding what the components of intelligence are. And with specific reference to businesses, it's been about understanding business intelligence. I had written in 1990 for Majuba Power Station because I ended up heading up the IT department. I started up the IT department and I ran it for 3 years at Majuba Power Station, where I developed a management information system. And that had been impressive enough for me to be part of the national team for the executive information system for this company. And I've been in that space ever since. Today, we look at different ways of making better quality decisions using data. Today, Lotus 123 is not even heard of by many people. And predominantly you're using Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. And so Excel itself is an area where I've had to do a lot of work in. The things which control data today allows you to be able to get far better quality handles on the business intelligence required to make the quality decisions that allows you to compete internationally. So, the unfortunate thing is, this seems to be the domain of IT people only. And I object to that. Because every manager today types up his own emails. In the early 80s, late 90s even, it was that you would get a typist to do your work for you. Today, you check your own emails, you develop your own emails. In the mid-80s to the mid-90s, you would be asking some guru somewhere to use a product, Harvard Graphics, which is a precursor to today's PowerPoint, to try and help you visualize the data that you're trying to look at. And the better the quality of the visualization, the better the quality of the decision making. And we learned a lot of lessons along the way about how to tell lies using graphs. And they always say, there's a word about statisticians who lie. But the point is that if we use the data ourselves, we make better quality decisions today. Imagine you're in your car and you're driving to a different province. You're driving through 2 or 3 provinces on the way there. You have in the car, as the driver, a dashboard that says, you know how much fuel you have left for the journey. You know, your odometer says how many kilometers you've already used up. Your speedometer is telling you whether or not you're following the speed limit. You've got these things up here. If you use your phone and you use Android Auto, Apple Car, and you've linked it to your car, and you're using that to ensure that you're following the directions to get to the point where you need to be, then you get there quicker because Google Maps will tell you that there's an accident on the road, there's a speed camera here, it diverts you, it takes you where you want to be fairly quickly. Now, at 63, I remember how I did that in my 20s. You would get a map book. I've not seen a map book for an eternity. But you'd have this book and you'd open up a page and you'd firstly look up the place where you're planning to go to. You'd look up where you are, and then you would be able to find an A4 page where the destination was, and then plot out and with handwritten notes on the sides. Okay, I will have to take the N3 from point A to point B. I need to remember, I must write down what the off-ramp numbers were. I must remember where to go. And if there was a diversion in the road, you needed to pause, go back, pull over on the side of somewhere, and pore over these maps, trying to figure out what the alternate route was. And hopefully the map was up to date. Hopefully you would be able to know that you could find routes through dirt roads or others until you get to the point. So imagine then that you've got to phone somebody, and those are no mobile devices. You'd have to make sure you'd find a public phone along the road. Phone somebody. Ask them where the next stop must be. Imagine you did not have your own map book, and you'd have to give them directions, you'd have to give them landmarks where you're at. And if they could not find the landmarks, you'd have to drive around until you found a landmark that they could recognize. And once they recognize that landmark, they'd ask for you to call back in a couple of minutes after they consulted and phoned around and made sure that they knew what the next step was going to be. And then you'd go to the next point. The number of hours that you'd be late, you'd never be able to guarantee when you are going to be arriving at your destination. And that is the situation where managers have to rely on a single department to do the mapping out and the tracking of everybody's key performance indicators, ensuring that one department is responsible for helping you navigate through your business is irresponsible. In the 2020s, we today need to know that every manager knows how to use Excel, at least Excel. If nothing else, you need to know you can put together a budget. You do need to know that you can analyze the data. You do need to know that you can visualize your own data. You do know that you can test to see whether or not a given graph that you've been given is calibrated correctly to ensure that you don't make bad quality decisions because the graph looked at the wrong data. So you need to map the graphs out, the pie charts, the flow diagrams out. You need to, as a manager today, need to know that you personally are able to read your dashboard in the same way that when you get your driver's license, you personally have to know that you've got to check your tire pressure. You personally need to know that you can go and confirm that there is enough petrol to take you the distance. And you personally need to know that if your vehicle is traveling at 80 kilometers an hour, that is a true 80 kilometers an hour. You personally are responsible for ensuring that your vehicle gets maintained. Doesn't matter how you do that, but you do need to know that when it needs to be serviced, you've taken it in, it is serviced, it is ready for the next leg of the journey. If we are so confident of our ability with a driver's license to take our vehicle to the correct destinations, and you are a manager who has learned to drive a decade or more ago, but you cannot read a graph, then that is irresponsible. If you cannot put together a graph, it is equally irresponsible. You need to learn to visualize the path that you're taking your division in. And you need to be able to ensure that you have the data at your disposal to make the calibrated decisions that are required. And so, the tools which are at your disposal today still are spreadsheets. I hope over the next series of videos, just to unpack that a little bit further, some of the times, in fact, often, I will be rubbing up some of the people who take this as their profession in the wrong way. To you, I say this. You may have studied to be in IT. You may have committed your life to want to be in IT and in computers. But that is an outdated thought process. It's like saying, I'm going to be an expert at being a pencil pusher, or I'm going to use a pencil. Because after all that Leonardo da Vinci was somebody who understood paint. He really knew how to wield a hammer and a chisel. And he really knew how to mix his paint colors. That's all that Leonardo da Vinci was. The people within IT have a responsibility to empower the managers to be able to make better quality decisions by exposing data models to them in such a way how those data models help them make better quality decisions. Somebody who's in HR management knows how they are looking at staff turnover ratios. They know how they are looking at staff motivation. They're looking at morale. And they have metrics they use for that. That may not come from your ERP system. That means they have a responsibility to be able to gather the data by whichever means they can. Somebody in stores is not looking at the cost of a transaction, but they are definitely looking at stock turnover ratios. They are definitely looking at the cost of storage. And if you do not have that within your ERP solution, that is what materials management is all about. They need to know that intimately. Somebody who is in fleet management or production management, they understand the information that they need to make better quality decisions. Somebody who's in IT knows how to handle version control of the source code which they have at their disposal. They know how to be able to access the different systems and subsystems. But your job is to empower the materials management guy, the HR person, the finance person to be able to have access to the data models that drives transactions of every form throughout the organization. Somebody in marketing needs to be able to have access to the marketing information that drives their market share. And that exceeds more than just what's in your ERP system. They should be able to keep track of metrics about the whole market. The question which you need to ask if you are a manager is, where do I get the overall superset of data within which my job role operates? How do I know my department's positioning within the realm of data that defines this industry? Your job, if you're in IT, is to understand that you need to talk to the managers and ask them where their supersets of data lie, where the subsets of data lie. And you need to give them the tools, help them build the data models for them to have a handle on their data so that they may make better quality decisions, data-driven decisions. If you're in HR, you need to be asking yourself, do all of my managers have the skills required to visualize the information that they rely on? If they don't, then you as in HR, looking at the talent of your pool of resources, are failing the organization, because you're failing to allow that organization to be adaptable and responsive to changes in data flow. The gold, the fuel, the oil upon which an organization runs, upon which an economy runs, is data. Not just data, but intelligence. And that intelligence is what's required to navigate through these waters of our economies, especially after the global pandemic has decimated so many industries. It's up to us within the data management sciences and within data science as a whole to be able to empower our managers, our thought leaders, to make the quality decisions needed to take all of us out of these recessions, these constant economic woes. And the way they do that is through better quality, data-driven decisions. In those days when I started, the IT department was not called IT, but deeply data processing. The more we focus on the technology, the less we focus on the data. My message, starting with this particular session, and in all the ones to come hereafter, is about ensuring that our managers know clearly how to make good quality decisions based on the data that's at their disposal. And it is to ensure that we know what we need to ask of our IT team when it comes to the models that are required. And you as a manager, you as a staff member, you as an operator, you need to understand that when you've got a handle on the data that flows through your fingertips daily, you can know that you can start modeling that yourself. And we start modeling that data first, and then somebody else looks at that and says, I think I can help you automate that and share that and collaborate with others a bit better. But it starts with understanding data science and data modeling that is accessible at every level of the organization, every skill level, and like we're expecting everybody who has a driver's license to drive a vehicle and understand what it takes. In the modern world, in the modern workplace, the modern workplace warrior needs to know what data is accessible to them to help them make better quality decisions. I hope to see you on the next video. I hope to see you in one of my classes. I hope to see the work which you've done shared with us so that we can see how the quality decisions that you've supported have improved the livelihoods of the local economies within which your business and your career has taken you into.